We're going to kick it off today. I'll do a brief introduction of Micha Schildmann. He is the Vice President of Strategy at Planetly by OneTrust. In his role, Schildmann leads the ESG, business development, enterprise solutions, and partnership teams at Planetly by OneTrust. And in his role in ESG, which as Peter said is our major focus today, is to expand software enterprise solutions for Planetly. Good morning, Micha, and welcome to the Wall Street Green Summit for 2022.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you so much, Peter, for inviting me, for having me. Warm welcome to everyone in this webinar. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here today. Maybe just to expand a bit on the introduction by Paul, to myself also, and to establish a bit of context where Planetly is involved in the ESG management space. So I've been in the financial industry for now almost 15 years. Like I was on the trading floor of the financial crisis, 27. So that's a long time ago. And yeah, worked in investment banking, then switched to strategy consulting, where I worked at McKinsey, working with financial investors, mainly banks, asset manager, private equity firms, on a number of topics, digitalization, strategy. And then after my educational leave, I did a PhD program at a fintech company builder. I helped building up the climate change service line at McKinsey, where we supported investors on developing climate strategies and preparing them for a future that is more sustainable than it was back then. And it was quite interesting because we were basically a team of consultants trying to figure out the carbon footprint of huge asset portfolios via Excel files, and this obviously was, it didn't really scale that much. And although we did great work back then, I realized that that sustainability can only be solved at scale through software. Wanted to found my own business in that space first, but then met Ben and Anna, the founders of Planetly, and then helped building up Planetly, which was for who does not know, Planetly was founded 2 years ago. We are now 200 employees with over 250 customers all over the world from 10 different industries, including a lot of financial investors, PEs, VCs, also banks. And we started with providing carbon management solutions through software, and quite successfully, I'd say, and so successful that OneTrust, then our new mothership, acquired us in the end of last year. And now we are in the progress of developing a new ESG value proposition together with them. We just launched our first ESG software module dedicated to financial investors to manage the ESG frameworks or ESG KPIs and metrics across whole portfolios in accordance to current regulations such as TCFD and SFDR in Europe mainly. And so it's I think it's the overall industry, the investment industry has been, let's say, picked up by a storm, a positive storm of sustainability, where like the combination of increased regulation, but also epiphany of the importance of sustainability on the investment side has driven a lot of change, a lot of momentum, especially in Europe, where you could say the market is a bit more mature, but also now picking up significantly in the US, for example, through the SEC ruling last week with increased requirements for transparency on climate-related KPIs. And despite the fact that some of the details are not fully clarified yet, we see high demand from US players when it comes to carbon management specifically, but also broader ESG metrics, given that there is the realization that ESG is not only important from a risk management perspective, but can be a real value driver in the portfolio of investors. And yeah, that's exactly where we support our customers in driving sustainability in the portfolio and create shareholder and stakeholder value.
Micha, I have a question for you related to the ESG focus of your firm. You mentioned already that TCFD and SFDR, especially in the EU, are really the focus of a lot of regulatory engagement and even law writing as these platforms expand across the EU. Tell our audience what you think is going to be the influence that those are going to bring into the US markets, and during what kind of time frame do you think that that's going to happen?
Yeah, very good question. I think in general, there's a challenge of very heterogeneous framework landscape globally, right? So that a lot of jurisdictions have their own frameworks, and that kind of creates friction also when it comes to transparency and reporting across these jurisdictions. But we also see kind of a more converging dynamic when it comes to these frameworks. For example, TCFD seems to be the emerging framework also outside of UK. For example, it is discussed also in the US to be at least kind of an inspiration for the rules to be imposed. Same for Canada, for example. And I think this trend of converging frameworks will continue. I think the timeline remains to be seen. Now with the SEC ruling, there will definitely be a lot of discussions. I understand there will be a period of comments allowed for the current ruling, where probably a lot of open questions, such as one example, the optionality of Scope 3 emission reporting will probably also cause some sort of delay. But I believe that just because of the fact that the EU is going very fast on the regulation, whether it's SFDR, which is more or less a predecessor of the EU taxonomy, which is kind of the leading framework in the future of the EU to align all investment and business activities with the sustainability goals of the EU, will also lead to the fact that other regions will follow suit, because in the end it will be a requirement for each business that wants to have activities in the EU to follow these frameworks, which means that they need to start reporting this in any case. And that's what we already see today. So already today we have companies from all over the world asking us to support them in EU specific regulation, just because they want to keep the competitive edge also. In the end, sustainability will be a competitive edge, and companies who are not able to comply or also to show progress will probably be left behind, similar as in the large digitalization wave, like a decade ago. So we believe that it will be a fundamental requirement of companies, independently of regulation, to follow the frameworks and to create this transparency.
Good. Well, thank you very much for that remark. I want to remind our audience that you can submit questions through the Q&A section of the screen, and we'd like to get your Micha's thoughts on what our audience is concerned about and questioning. Micha, I have one other question, and then I'm going to ask Peter to jump in with anything that he wants to bring to this part of our conversation. But it's also true that from the ESG and asset management side of this discussion, that any asset manager in the US with over 500 employees has to strictly follow all of the regulatory guidelines in the EU in order to do business there, which of course is where most of the large asset managers in the US do much of their business beyond here in the US. Is there any discussion in the European markets about that changing things or that accelerating the pace of any of this development?
Yeah, definitely. I think building upon what I mentioned earlier, I think this requirement by the EU affects companies globally, and that's also increasing the take-up of these rules. SFDR has been delayed in the implementation by half a year now, so we actually see a bit of a hesitation to start adopting right away, because there's also some unclarity around certain aspects of the regulation. But with the customers that we talk, they all know that it will be coming, that they know that they will have quite a lot of additional requirements that will only be solved through scalable solutions, i.e. software. So we see the adoption of, for example, of our tools already quite a bit, even if the regulation is not fully implemented yet. And I think everyone, that's what we hear from the market, everyone is just basically, preparing for this and knowing that this is coming. And they also see this as a chance for themselves to actually also create this competitive edge against other competitors and become the leading players in the market through sustainability. And I think this is a very positive development for the world in general, right? Because it becomes a bit kind of a race to the top, who becomes more sustainable.
Okay, Peter, you mentioned several of the technologies that are in rapid development in the energy space just a few minutes ago in your introductory remarks. Why don't you give us your perspective, investor perspective, on how rapidly those technologies are going to accelerate in growth, and start with the US markets.
Well, the existing technologies for solar and wind are already mature. They're already there. The costs come down 95% for solar, 60% for wind. The real other technology that I was mentioning before is hydrogen. Hydrogen is expensive, and we really need to get the cost down from 10 to 12 kilograms to about $1 to $2 a kilogram. So that it's called bending the cost curve, Paul. If we don't get the price down, then it's not affordable for most people. And that's what happened in solar. It became globally deployable when you got the cost down. So the real game is not a need for money. There's plenty of what we call dry powder on Wall Street available for new technologies. It's really scaling and commercializing those technologies this decade. So the game is project financeable assets in clean energy, clean water. Looking on the weekend, I was looking at some nanotechnology for coating batteries because the lithium-ion batteries have a lot of heat. So there are issues on that side. The other side is that there is some disruption in the supply chain in the minerals and mining for lithium and other rare earths. So it's not very simple. These things take time, but the reality is we're on the right track. And I'll leave it at that.
Good. So, Micha, based on what Peter's just shared with us, how does Planetly interface with their clients and customers related to enterprise-wide solutions, especially when a company has global operations in multiple economies and across multiple political infrastructures around the world?
Yeah, I think solving for sustainability in complex supply chains is kind of the holy grail of sustainability, right? And I think this is something that is very dear to Planetly to solve this problem at scale. We are working with a number of multinational conglomerates or corporations on especially this, understanding the supply chains across the globe, understanding the impact not only on carbon, but also other environmental impact categories such as water use or biodiversity. And what we see is two elements. A, this can only be solved at scale through quantitative models and data, and thus you need to have also the right solution to capture the data, to process the data, and to allow for also comparative analysis of multiple suppliers in one tool. And second, that this is quite a challenge because there's often not data available from the suppliers who are quite fragmented, who are not as digitalized yet. And I think solving this this issue of data availability is one of the core focus also of Planetly right now. We do see a lot of acceleration in general when it comes to the ambition of companies, when it comes to supply chain analytics and also driving sustainability in supply chain. So for example, you can see some European players requiring a lot of sustainability related data when in the context of RFPs, which means you can only make a bid if you actually disclose scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. We are working on a tool that is able to provide comparable data on suppliers at scale and compare also the carbon footprint of products by these suppliers. I think this is kind of a quite monumental task, just because there are so many.
By some fake accounts are posting on our event page. Is there anything we can do to stop this? They're creating fake links. They're all over the place and confusing everybody.
Sorry, where is this?
On the website. On the website.
I think
I'm seeing them through the blog. I mean, I'm getting Marissa's saying we're getting fake accounts.
I think he's not muted. I think he's muted.
We are leading people to click fake links saying register free. They're all fake links and we're getting zoomed on, getting slammed on this. And just take a look. I don't know what to do. No, thank you.
Peter, I think you're
Yeah, Peter, you were just
yourself.
You were you were not muted for those remarks. So
okay, look, we're getting slammed by people that are posting fake links on our site. So there's a lot of confusion. I'm trying to fix it. I can't answer any questions.
Okay, so we'll proceed, Micha. I had a question. Oh, yes, I know what I wanted to ask you. A lot of our audience may or may not be comfortable with or conversant with the various scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions categories and what they comprise. And as you said, when you do an enterprise wide solution, you have to develop for all 3 of those possibilities. We've got a few minutes left in our segment here. So if you would, please give us a brief description of each scope of emissions and what you see that meaning to the people, the companies that you work with.
Right. So very briefly, so the 3 scopes of the greenhouse gas emissions reflect the closeness of the emissions to the direct influence of each company. So you have a scope 1, which is basically direct combustion of fuel from the company. So for example, fuel in cars or gas heating on site. Then you have scope 2, which is which are indirect emissions purchased or created through the purchase of energy through the company, which for example is district heating, right? So basically a power plant creates these emissions and you purchase the heating energy. And these 2 emissions are usually the most easy to calculate because of the closeness of these emissions to the activity of the business. Usually the data is quite readily available, and you get also the primary data, so the actual fuel consumption data, for example. And then you have scope 3, which is basically all the emissions that occur outside of the company without direct influence. And this can be purchased goods and services. These can be investments. This can be business travel, home office commute of employees. So it's a wide range of activities which are usually very difficult to assess in an exhaustive manner by companies. And that's why there are also a lot of different approaches on how these emissions can be calculated with a varying degree of accuracy. And what we do from our side is we provide exactly this flexibility to calculate the emissions even with very little data, or let's say low quality data such as spend-based data, right? So that you can, for example, calculate emissions based on the money that you spend on business travel, or the money that you spend on purchasing certain goods. But we also provide, and that's kind of the first step on the journey to a high accuracy scope 3 footprint. And then we also provide options to calculate the emissions based on, for example, activity. So how many flights how many flights have your employees taken in the last year, but also material-based analysis. So, for example, you purchased X tons of steel. What is the implied emissions based of this? And here we leverage LCA models, or life cycle assessment models, which are scientific models to calculate emissions across the whole life cycle of a product. And this is probably the golden standard of emission calculation, and it's quite tricky to apply at scale. And we came up with a supply chain analysis model that is able to do this at scale, usually based with ERP data, right? So that's data that's readily available for most of the companies, and that then provides them really a transparency that was usually not possible before. And it also allows them to derive reduction measures, to derive targets, to derive, a roadmap to net zero by using our data, by leveraging our tools. And this is something that has been quite the game changer for a lot of companies. So, for example, we had one fashion company that was able to reduce their emissions in scope 3 by over 50%, 50, by changing the material input, which in turn was based on our analysis, right? So they switched from normal cotton to recycled or organic cotton. And this kind of analysis, this kind of data-driven reduction measure, selection and implementation is what we believe will be the real driver in the decarbonization of the economy. And that's where we want to lead the pack.
Great. Yeah, that last one was a great example, Micha. Just the fact that the different type of cotton that is used to create garments could drive that kind of dramatic change in a company's enterprise solutions. That's really extraordinary. So I'm really glad that we've got you out there and that Planetly is providing these kinds of services. And we want to thank you very much, Micha, for kicking off the sponsored portion of the program today. And please, our audience, keep reaching out to us throughout the entire summit and give us your questions. This is the opportunity for you to speak directly to the experts. So please join us. And Micha, thank you very much again for your remarks today. Micha Schildmann is the Vice President of Strategy at Planetly by OneTrust. And part of his focus is working with the ESG teams at that firm, and they help other firms develop enterprise-based solutions. Thanks very much, Micha. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, enjoy it.
Have a great day. Cheers.
You too.
Bye.